Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You'll find the links in the podcast description. I'm also a podcasting coach because I've got 4 other podcasts: meditation, learn Polish, crypto, and awakening. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today, I get plenty of speakers, but I don't think of the caliber and who have done as much speaking as my guest today. He's actually corporate storyteller, speaker coach, team trainer, but now also an author as well. Please welcome Steve Multer.
Roy, thank you so much. That's very, very kind and very generous of you. I'm not sure I deserve all of it, but I'll take it for the moment. And
I can see your professionalism because I have kind of like a questionnaire that I kind of have for all my guests coming on. And I know sometimes we'll connect with other platforms, but I know from the response how professional a person is because they actually do as what I say, even pictures and different things. So I know straight away, you don't do things by half measure. When you're doing something, like, it's excellence. And I could see that just from the form alone.
Oh, that is so kind of you. Yeah, my wife always ribs me because she and we share one of many mantras that we share is chance favors the prepared. So as an independent vendor, which I have been my entire life, as a contractor who speaks wherever I need to speak, I've realized long ago, the more you can think in advance, what might somebody ask me for? Going down the line, as I go through my life, if somebody picks up the phone and says, "Hey, can you send me a fill in the blank?" The best response is always, absolutely, I'll have it to you in 3 minutes. But that takes a lot of offline thinking to always be prepared and ready to go so that when that request comes in the door, you don't have to think, oh, I'll get back to you in 3 weeks. Always better to just be ready to go. So you said, here's what I need. And I said, great, Roy, here it is.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I kind of touched on the key points, but you might just let the listeners know a little more about Steve.
All right. So I actually began my career as an actor back in the 1970s and 1980s, growing up in Southern California. I did television and film work, and then I did some stage work for quite some time, and I assumed that would be my lifelong career. And then all of a sudden in the mid-90s, during the dot-com boom, something very accidental happened, and I ended up no longer being an actor and moving into what was called at the time corporate theater. So still on stage, still playing a role, but all of a sudden speaking on behalf of large corporations, in many cases, global fortune corporations, to help them tell their stories. And frequently somebody would drop a script into my hand. I would pick up that script and try to be as believable and credible as I could as a representative of that firm and that organization. And all of a sudden, about 2 or 3 years later, by the late 90s, I looked at my wife and I said, well, guess what? I'm not an actor anymore. I'm not auditioning. I'm not in theater. I'm not singing songs. I'm not dancing. I'm doing this thing now. And so when people say, how did you get into this really interesting career of speaking on behalf of corporations? I always say it was by accident. I didn't plan on it. Like so many things in life, it just dropped in at the right time. And I guess I saw an open window and I was willing to climb through it. It's the idea of saying yes to the universe, that when it offers you certain things, you say, all right, let's give it a try. And I found that I enjoyed it. And so if we sort of pick up at that point, a very brief overview, I've spent the last 27 years as a creative strategist for market messaging, as a corporate storyteller for major brands, a speaker coach, a team trainer for executive presence training and winning communications training. And I work with some of the biggest companies on the planet. And for some reason, they continue to come back to me again and again. And I wish I could figure out what that is, but hopefully it's because I take care of them and love them and treat them as my own. And that's what brings us up to today.
No, brilliant. And like I saw that, I mean, you've like the Sony, Volvo, there's a load, Siemens, all the top guys. Is it a case that when you land 1 or 2 of these, it just opens the door for others that you're kind of putting it on your CV and go, oh, I've already been to these, and then it just kind of spirals from there? Is it just trying to get the door open at the start is kind of the biggest hurdle, I assume?
It's a very interesting thing, Roy. So if you think about it as a crowd walking down a street, and if you see a crowd off in the distance and you think, ooh, what's that? I'd like to be a part of that. Energy tends to attract more energy. Passion tends to attract more passion. Groups tend to attract more groups. And what I do is very much a word of mouth and a visual commodity with regards to marketing and new corporations bringing me in the door. The more places I speak, the more people tend to hear me speak and see me speak and wonder, wonder what this guy is all about. And if we can get them involved in what we're trying to do in our own projects and our own events. And that's the way things tend to work out. So yes, I am mostly word of mouth. I do have some marketing and some promotion out there in the world, but I find it doesn't do as much for me as simply being visible, meeting as many people as I possibly can. And I think as a speaker, for all of your listeners, for all of your viewers here on the podcast, that's really an enormously important thing. Being a quality speaker is one thing. Being a known commodity as a speaker really does mean putting yourself out there in the world, being willing to meet people, being out in public. I find a lot of speakers are actually introverts at heart. They're great speaking in front of others, but ask them to go into a party and glad hand and get to know people and learn their names and ask questions about them. This is much harder for people. And I think it really does up your quality as a speaker, ups your capacity to develop more business and to open up doors to new opportunities. The more public you can be, the better off it seems to work.
Yeah, brilliant. So I know you do writing for speeches. Like when you write, you're kind of writing with your kind of charisma. And how do you make sure that the person that you're giving it to doesn't just kind of destroy it? Do you have to work very closely to make sure that they're actually connecting with the audience and getting the message that you're trying to deliver, that you know with your experience will work?
Oh, you're tugging at my heartstrings, Roy. That's such a great question. So yes and yes. So first of all, when we write for other people, and I want all of your listeners to keep this in mind, the most organic communication that you can deliver, the most value-based and value-driven communication you can deliver will always be created by you. One of the reasons that so many talks that we hear, so many presentations either fail or fail to connect is because they are written by someone else for you to deliver. So when we sit in an audience and we listen to a C-level from a major corporation speak, and it leaves us flat, there's no passion, there's no emotion, there's no connection point there for us. Frequently, it's because that C-suite didn't have time to create their own content. It was given to somebody else within their marketing department or their development department to write on their behalf. And they are trying to jam these words that they wouldn't normally use into their own natural levels of speech. And we can hear that disconnect. They're simply blathering out corporate speak language, marketing language that doesn't really connect with an audience. So the more we can craft our own content, I think the more talented we become as speakers. It makes our job easier. The better the message that you write on the paper or on the screen, the better a natural speaker you're going to become right out of the gate, because you'll feel more comfortable. You'll feel more connected to your own content. The other side of that coin is when writing for other people, it really takes getting into their mindset, understanding how they operate, what is important to them, what they find valuable. If we go back to the Greek concepts of logos, pathos, ethos, right, that we learned back in school, the idea of logos being information driven, pathos being driven by our feelings, our emotions about what we are trying to communicate. And on top of that sits our ethos, the concept of what is most important to us personally, morally, foundationally. What do we believe in, and what are we willing to invest in with regards to intelligent messaging? Trying to bring those together for someone else as a writer, I find to be one of the most challenging things I do. It's also one of the most rewarding. When I get to know somebody well enough to climb inside their brain and say, okay, Roy Coughlan has to deliver a talk at this next conference, I get to write Roy's content. Who is Roy? And I get to kind of delve deep and pick Roy apart so that I can create content that makes the most sense for you, that you look at it and you say, that's what I wanted to say. That's it. Right there. Perfect. That's the way I speak. That's what I want to say and communicate to someone else to prove value for them. Great. Now Roy's job is a million times easier. That's when I know I've achieved success as a corporate writer for other people to speak content.
Excellent. Excellent. So what I'd love now is, because a lot of the time, especially with all your experience, you've gone on a journey where you kind of probably look back and see all the different things that went wrong. So if you can think of some of the things, whether equipment or just on your journey, that went wrong and that maybe could have been rectified, if we could touch on some of them.
Oh, I love that. Nothing's ever gone wrong in my career, Roy. It's always been perfect from day one. I listened to your great episode with Sue Coral, who was just, she was really a very interesting, dynamic person. She talked about vulnerability and compassion, right? Being willing to share your failures with your audience because they respond to that. That's meaningful. Why? Because it humanizes you. So often we speak from corporate content. We talk product, solution, service, corporation, but we forget to talk about the human, the person who is delivering the story. So I loved what Sue had to say. Most of the times that I have failed have been because I have forgotten that I am in a conversation with my audience. I lecture them. I stand on stage, I stand in front of them, I look into a camera like I'm doing now, and I deliver a lecture. And I tell people what matters to me and what is most important to me and what I think you should be doing. And it fails 100% of the time. And I still do it to this day. Even as long as I've been speaking, I still forget. This is a two-way conversation. The only person that matters in this conversation is you. If I'm looking at an audience or looking into a camera, I am there for the other person's benefit. And that's whether I'm speaking to one person across the table, you and I speaking right now, or I speak to a client or a boss or a colleague, or if I'm looking into a camera, speaking to 100,000 people tuning in on a broadcast, or sitting in an arena on stage with 10,000 or 20,000 people in front of me. The concept is the same. How can I open a dialogue? So there are specific times when I've really failed in that particular capacity. One of the biggest that I can remember, I have to go back a little ways. Hopefully I've learned in all of these years how to avoid some of those. But I was interviewing the CEO of a corporation that does security and safety for very large logistics within enormous spaces, shopping malls, arenas, train stations, airports, and so forth. And I was on stage with the CEO, and I was on stage with Steve Wozniak, who was the special guest there at the event. And I was interviewing both. I had interviewed them each separately. Now we brought them together. And I realized that I was pulling all of my focus onto Wozniak. Why? Because, well, he's the star. He's the reason that everybody's here. There's my client, the C-level, the CEO of the corporation sitting right there. And I realized at the end, I maybe gave him 10% of my attention, and I put 90% of it on Wozniak, and I put 0% of it on the audience. And I walked away, said, Steve, you blew it. That was a terrible, terrible interview, because you did everything that the average interviewer with zero experience would do. I focused on the star. I forgot who the real stars of the show are. And the real stars of the show are the audience who paid to be in that room, to be part of the experience, and that C-level who brought us all together and created this opportunity for us to combine forces with one another. As a speaker, our job is always to serve others, never ourselves. I spent that entire time serving myself. I learned a really, really big lesson from it, and knock wood, I haven't made that mistake since.
Excellent. I love that one. Yeah, brilliant. And I'm just curious on this one, because with the craziness that's going on in the world, it seems to be getting worse every day. And my belief is we need people to become better speakers to get their message across. And a good way of touching this, and not just meaning, I'm on about a lot of people that are going into the corporations, because we know that there is a lot of corruption inside in them, without stepping on the toes of those who pay you. But the people, if you're even at mid-level or high level, they could be the next CEO of the company. Is there ways that you can touch these people to make them kind of conscious of the bad things they're doing?
Oh, Roy, that is a fantastic question. I don't think anybody has asked me that before. I believe that when I use corporate storytelling, a lot of people say, well, what is corporate storytelling? What does that even mean? And just fundamentally, to go back to any of your speakers who may not have been exposed to that particular term, it's the idea of whenever you speak, whenever you deliver a message, combining the details of your topic or your capability with personal human experiences that the audience can actually relate to and find value in and become passionate about, so that they can invest in your core message in some way. And a lot of times when I work with some of the people that you're talking about, they have forgotten what their core message really is. They are so all about the foundations, the bottom line, the shareholders, meeting quarterly expectations, profit margins, dealing with expenses, that they forget what we're really here to do. And what we're really here to do is uplift others whenever we communicate. Because anytime we get into any interaction, like the one you and I are having right now, we are asking one another right now to set aside 30 minutes, 45 minutes of our lives to be together, to put everything else aside for you and I to have a conversation with one another. The only value in that conversation is if Roy and Steve both walk away thinking, that was absolutely worth my time. That was fantastic. I'm so glad that we did this, because it created value for both of us. Hopefully, any of your audience that listens to this podcast walks away thinking, yeah, that was a great use of my time. I'm so glad I did that instead of the million other things I could have been doing. When I work with executives in these large corporations who have forgotten their real purpose, they're so busy doing their jobs that they have forgotten to create value for others. The way that we can make positive change, even within massive corporations, is to remind them what we are really here to do, the message we are actually here to deliver, and the value that we are to create for others, the passion that we need to engage them in order to get them passionate about what we want to talk about. So when I run into the most difficult companies to work with, that is my target. That's my goal. And I'll just add one more story. I mentioned that I just came from Münster, from Greven, and I was working with a very large printing press manufacturer. And they were giving a tour through a factory of the largest corrugated printing press I have ever seen in my life. It was overwhelming. And they invited their own existing clients in from all over the world to see this new application in action. And I was leading tours showing them how the application worked. And when I arrived to start to prepare for the tour a couple of days in advance, the client, they were joyless. They were so scared, so worried about how everything was going to transmit, that all they were doing was talking product, and numbers. And I said, stop. We're never going to reach your customers and your guests that way. They need to hear why this matters to them. Why do people care? Why have they gotten on that plane? Not to read the numbers. They can read that out of a brochure or off of your website, or you can have a Zoom call with them like you and I are doing right now and give them all your metrics, your KPIs, your statistics, your data points, your foundationals. They don't care about that. They want to see you being excited about this remarkable box plant capability that we are showing to them. And if you can show them your passion, then they will ask for all the numbers, the details, the pricing points. It was a really terrific turnaround to watch them within about 3 hours start to drop all of that fear and all of that number-driven content and get to the personal content that actually made their product and their story soar. So that is how I think we get to these big corporations, and we help them to remember what they are truly in the room to do. Why was the company founded? What's the whole point? Got to get back to that. It was meant to fill a gap in the market. That's why the company was built initially. It was built from passion. And over time, that passion goes away. The larger the corporation, the farther they are from their foundation.
Oh, well, that's brilliant.
So a very long answer to your very short.
No, but a fantastic answer. Love it. But for those then going back another layer that want to get on the speaking journey, especially if they have a message like that, they're trying to make change in the world. There's a lot of people petrified. I was very late to the game, and I know it's the same for a lot of people, even with guests, because I kind of get their journey. What's your kind of advice for people that basically their knees are buckling, if they even think about that they have to speak in public?
Oh, it's still, Roy, as you know, it is still the world's #1 fear, right? Jerry Seinfeld had that fantastic line that if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be the one in the casket than the one delivering the eulogy, which I always thought was a terrific line. In my book and throughout my coaching and throughout my training, what I deal with primarily is getting people past that hump of a fear of public speaking, or up-leveling them from being what I would deem a general speaker, somebody who is competent and fine at it, but really hasn't started to excel or reach the level of speaking that they would like to reach. And there are certain foundations that are not mine. I've learned them from others who are far smarter and far more adept than I am, but they are still excellent, excellent lessons for all of us to learn. Number one, we are evolutionarily speakers at heart, every one of us. We still come from an oral tradition background. We have all evolved through oral tradition. And despite growth in media and television and radio and film and social media and online capabilities, from the time of the invention that Gutenberg invented the printing press up until now, oral tradition remains to this day on all continents around the world the number one method of translating and transmitting messaging from one person to another person. So we've been gathering around the campfire or around the dinner table to tell stories to one another since the dawn of time. We just get in our own way, pardon me, and it's fear built. So when you're a child, it's the old Pablo Picasso line, right? All children are born artists, but staying an artist as you continue to get older, that's the hard part. That's the challenge. Storytelling works the same way. Speaking is the same. Look at any 3-year-old, 4-year-old child. They cannot wait to get up in front of the room and perform a play. They want to dance, they want to sing, they want to tell their stories. You can't shut them up. And then what happens as we get older? The fear starts to creep in. So it's a learned commodity. It's called FNE, fear of negative evaluation is the psychological term for it. And FNE creeps in. So when you're little, you will love to speak in front of people because you don't worry about being judged. You don't worry whether what you say is right or wrong. And then all of a sudden, there's that first experience in the classroom where you raise your hand and you deliver the wrong answer and the teacher says, nope, wrong. Or the other children laugh at your answer. And that's your first lesson in fear of negative evaluation. And every class, every time you make a mistake, it tamps that natural desire to speak down further and further and further. And by the time we graduate high school and then perhaps university and go into our careers, we learn that it's safest to just fly below the radar, do not speak up, don't say a word, because it's less risk of being evaluated negatively. Here's the bottom line that gets to your question. Your audience is not judging you. They are not negatively evaluating you. Why? First of all, they're just so glad that it's you up there on that stage instead of them. They don't want to be the one to be negatively evaluated. You're taking that off their shoulders. Tomorrow, it's their turn to speak. Today, it's your turn to speak. They want you to succeed. The speaker-audience relationship is one of positivity and optimism. The moment you step on stage or on camera or speak in front of anyone, they want you to be wonderful. They are giving you their support and their love and their attention. If you can then just give them back value, if you know that what you are saying is of value to them, that fear of speaking goes further and further and further down with every word. They lean in because you're delivering value to them. You lean into them because they are giving you positive response. Try to focus on that instead of the negative evaluation, and your skills as a speaker are going to skyrocket instantly.
Fantastic. With kind of warm up then, getting on stage, because there's two things I'd like to delve on. One, to get on the stage to warm up, but also how to embrace the applause, because I've seen people and it's like the energy has left their body and they're coming off the stage and they're going, oh, and you're like, everyone is looking at them. It's like, do you realize that you kind of should stay a bit positive? So the kind of warm up, getting onto stage, what you'd recommend, and also how maybe to embrace an applause or just to even be leaving the stage.
I love that. All right. So I always talk about the opening and the closing of any presentation, any talk, any speech as bookends. The bookends sit on the outside. Your content, everything you're going to talk about, sits in the middle. Well, what happens if you have a stack of books with no bookends? The whole thing falls over in one direction or the other. You need those two bookends to hold your content together, because they are what give your audience some sort of concept of what it is that
I have them in all just right.
Hey, you got your pencils. Excellent. There you go. All right. Did everything collapse behind you now? That's the question.
No,
not yet. All right. So your opening bookend, if you think of your first thing, there are two elements that I want to mention. Number one is what I like to call the moment before. Before people step out on stage, several things tend to happen. Number one, huge nerves. People are very, very nervous, frightened to get up on that stage to begin. The second thing is people start to doubt that their content has enough value. They begin in their minds going over and over the content or rewriting it in their heads at the very last minute, which just makes them even more nervous. So what I would say with the moment before you step out into the spotlight or before the camera turns on, take a moment for yourself, step away and do anything other than think about your speech or think about your talk. Pop your AirPods in and listen to a piece of music that always makes you happy. Or go online, play a little game, distract yourself, give yourself an opportunity to just relax and be yourself in that moment before you step out. You don't have time to change your content. Even better, your content isn't worth changing, because just because you make something different doesn't mean you make it better. Trust your instincts. You know what you want to talk about. You know it in your heart. If we sit down over a beer the day before and I say, hey, what are you going to talk about in your speech? You can talk to me for 3 hours. You don't need notes. You don't need slides. You don't need a script. You don't need a confidence monitor. You're just talking about what you know. Whatever you get on stage and say is right for you. It's organic and natural. Trust yourself. Then when you get out on that stage with that opening, open with your audience and not with yourself. Begin by talking about them, what matters to them, what is most important to them, how you are there to serve them and their needs. When you talk about your audience first, they instantly connect with you. They know that they have chosen to do the right thing with their time by investing their time in you. If you open with value to them, you will always sail into your content from a point of power and from a point of confidence. Then when you get to the end, I see so many speakers, especially in the corporate world. Here's what they do. They run out of slides. They don't even know that they've run out of slides. They do the last click and it either goes to the hold screen or it goes back to the first slide and they say, okay, well, that's it. Thank you. And they leave the stage. And I think, really? I've just spent 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour with you, and the best you've got is thank you? What do we do with everything that we've just done together? Give your audience the next step. In the corporate world, we call it a call to action. You can call it whatever it is that you like. But your audience has just gained a great deal from their time with you. They've enjoyed the interactive experience. Hopefully you've made it interactive and conversational and you haven't lectured like I'm doing right now. Hopefully you've given them something to do as a next step that benefits them, that brings them the next step of the way or all the way or the first step of the way toward some new reality, some goal. When you run out of things to say, end with your audience like you started with your audience. Genuine thanks for their time. Remember, they could have done so many other things rather than be with you and your talk. The fact that they invested that time and attention in you, that is a gift. Honor and recognize that gift at the end of your talk. You will leave them with such a good taste in their mouths. Even if some of your content didn't hit, they will walk away saying, wow, that person's fantastic. They're really good. They really genuinely care about me. They tried to help me. And then accepting the applause, I think it's a great way. I don't usually put it that way, but I like that you put it that way, Roy. Accepting the applause means don't run away. Your talk, whether that talk lasts for 3 minutes, 30 minutes, 90 minutes, your talk it doesn't reach the end. The end of your talk is the beginning of a new relationship or the next step in a new relationship. So when that applause arrives, not only do you drink it in, you stick around. So if anybody wants to come and talk to you, ask you a question, shows you an open opportunity to engage with them, grab it, love it, hug it, hold on to it as long as you can. Because that talk, in an ideal world, anytime you deliver a talk, the value of it should last long after you've left the stage, the spotlight, the camera, or the lights have gone away and they've moved on. A good, successful talk lasts for hours, lasts for days. Sometimes it lasts for weeks or even months. Think about a good movie. It stays with you. You keep thinking about it again and again and again. The end of your talk should work the same way.
Brilliant, brilliant. So for those that are actually just listening, this is going out on Spotify, so you can actually see it. So you can see the book in the background. And just before we delve into the book, I always like to look at reviews and everything. It's just a thing that I like doing. And normally in any book or anything you'll always have 5 or 10% in negativity and everything. I couldn't find that. You had 100% 5-star rating. And I was like, okay, that is very, very rare because I look at that a lot and I read over 100 books myself. I look at the reviews and it's important. So I commend you on that. That's impressive.
That is so kind of you. Now, I will say In the book world, they don't like 100% five-star reviews because they feel, oh, those might be manipulated, or maybe they're all friends or all family or all people who are trying to build
I'm
it up.
going to
They
interject to save you on this one because I know when that's done because the people do it on the same date. So I
oh,
even
that's
checked
true.
that and I flicked through it and I was like, so I even done that for you. So I know that.
All right, fine, you win. I'm amazing. I'm brilliant. No, I will tell you what it is. Okay, here's what I think. First of all, that is so kind of you to say, and thank you. Here's where I think that comes from. The reason that the reviews have been extremely strong for the book and the reception has been so good. When people have been asking me and telling me that I ought to write a book for quite some time based on the work that I do. And my response was always pithy, something off the cuff of yeah, that's a book that like 12 people will want to read because it's so insider, it's so specific and so niche that I thought it wouldn't really have an audience. When I decided that it was time finally to write the book, it didn't come from my experience. It came from the industry experience, shifts that I saw within the industry and the nature of how communication was changing. And I took a completely different approach and I said, all right, every page of this book has to not only deliver value for the person who reads it, but it has to be about them, as I've been saying, and not about me and my experiences, but also it has to be applicable and practical. Anybody who reads the book and says, okay, so the name of the book is Nothing Gets Sold Until the Story Gets Told. And we've been talking about storytelling here. And the subtitle, which we worked on for a long time, is Corporate Storytelling for Career Success and Value-Driven Marketing. We came to that very specifically, and it was what I said to my editors, to my publisher was, I need every page of this book to give somebody a very specific thing, an action that they can do right now, today, regardless of their job title, education level, socioeconomic status, location in the world, whatever they're doing, they need to find a certain value on every page that they can put into action for themselves and for their own value. I want somebody to want to pick up a highlighter and highlight something on every single page. And if I don't get that, then I have failed in my writing of the book. And I think that's part of the reason the reviews have been strong, is people have said, finally, here's a book about giving a talk, giving a speech, being a storyteller from the stage that doesn't just say, here's what you should do, but follows it up with saying, and here is how you actually go and get it done. Here's how you make it happen. And I think that's where the good reviews come from.
Excellent. So, like, we can delve in about kind of what you've covered in it, but have you done the audio of this? Or are you planning to do the audio?
Yes, indeed. And I'm telling you something right now. I have never recorded an audiobook before. Have you recorded an audiobook?
I've done bits of it, but it's not easy. Because I've written a book, but I didn't release it. But I actually done it. It's kind of because we tend to be in our voice. It's hard when it's our own words that we've written. It's not. It's a strange kind of process.
I have never hated myself more than I did when I was recording my own audiobook. So the short answer is yes. It's available in hardcover, in paperback, in audiobook, in ebook, all the formats on all of the usual locations where you go to purchase books. But I sat in that studio reading my own words and listening to my own voice with headphones on. And I said, people who do this they're miracle makers. They're magic workers. I don't know how they get it done. Like I said, I hated myself. At one point, I remember working on the book at the very end during the last bit of editing. My wife came in and I had a photo of myself up and I'm editing my own words. And she said, aren't you sick of you? I said, Karen, I am so sick of me. I can't even begin to tell you. I have to do the work, but yes, I'm sick of me. And recording the audiobook, I was sick of me by the time that was done. I've never been happier to see a project go away. But the audiobook, I think it turned out quite well. And because I am a speaker, the engineer and the people who were working on it with me said, no, you did a great job. So I don't know if they were buttering me up or if they were being honest, but I'll take it.
And do you know how long, and maybe perhaps tell people how many pages approximately the book is, but how long did it take you actually to do the audio? Did you do it in a few days, or what was the kind of...
Oh, yeah. We jammed through it. I happen to be very good friends with the guy who owns the studio that I recorded it in, wonderful man named Matt Prock, who is Area 44 in Chicago, and that's where we recorded it at the Sound Bank. And we set aside 3 days for the initial recording, and then a fourth day for cleanup, patches, changes, fixes based on what my editor said. Nah, this didn't work. You sounded terrible. You didn't have any personality. You dumped that out. You messed up that line. So we had an extra day. So we did it in 4. It's about a 250-page book. So it was aggressive, but I spent, I would say, about 5 hours at a shot. And that's all I could handle mentally, was about 5 hours at a time. I know other people who've put in full 8-9 hour days on reading, and I think it's incredibly challenging. I think anything more than about 2 hours, and the mouth sort of turns to mush, and the brain certainly turns to mush.
And how do you stay? Because you're trying to stay consistent with your voice, and like it is tiring. I mean, like you say, 2 hours, and you feel the energy kind of starting to leak out. How do you say that you're not like your first 2 hours are hey, and the next are
Well, I will say now that part of it, for those of you who are listening to the podcast right now, who are recording audiobooks or thinking of recording an audiobook, I think as speakers, we do have a natural leg up, which is if I'm speaking throughout the course of a day, let's say I'm hosting a conference and it's a 3-day conference, or like the tour that I talked about that I just did up in Greven, Germany. That was a 2-hour tour across this equipment. And my job, I get paid to be as energetic, passionate, invested, and dedicated on the very last word of the tour as I am on the first word of the tour. And I think for those of us as speakers, that is incumbent upon us. The audience deserves our full energy, full focus, full attention from the very first word we speak to the very last word we speak, which means if we're feeling a bit tired and our energy starts to sag at the end of our storytelling, that's on us. It's a lesson to learn that we say the next time I deliver a speech, that I speak in front of others, I do not let my energy drop. Even if I feel it inside, on the outside, the energy stays high. Recording the audiobook is very much the same thing. The last word deserves as much emphasis as the first word.
Brilliant. With a speaking career, then, how do you navigate it in family life? Because if you're doing a lot of traveling and everything, is it difficult, or are you the type that's bringing your family with you? How have you made it work over the 20 years that you've been doing it?
Oh, Roy, I would love to ask you that same question. I think we're all trying to figure out the work-life balance. And for those of us who live in the tube, who fly in the airplane all the time and live out of the hotel in the suitcase, it seems so romantic from the outside. And then once you start to do it, the romance there's not a lot of romance. It's very challenging. It's hard work. 2 things. I got incredibly fortunate in that I married a woman who does the same thing that I do, and in fact, started it 5 years before I did. So I can credit my wife with bringing me into the industry. Now, as time went along, our careers sort of, I think we were kind of doing this, and we sort of, she eased back a bit when our children were born, continued to travel. When our children were little, we did bring them with us when we were both on the road speaking. And then as they got older and we couldn't do that any longer, we just had to be very strategic about one of us traveling at a time and the other one staying home at a time. My calendar was a bit thicker and a bit heavier, so we did fall into very traditional roles. I was the traditional man out on the road, and she was the traditional woman staying home with the family, even though that's not how we function at all. We just accidentally fell into that pattern. I think if you're going to be somebody who is on the road all the time, maintaining your energy, your excitement, your passion, your joy is incredibly difficult, like it is in any job. But I think traveling, in some ways, it's even more challenging. If you love your family and you want to be with them, as I do, I find it harder and harder the older I get to be away for longer periods of time. When my kids were little, it almost felt like a break. Oh, good. My wife can stay home and she can put them to bed and cook the meals and clean the house. And then my wife would go out and I would be happy to do that on the other end. As they've gotten older, I find it much harder. Time passes by very quickly. Children grow way too fast. We can always make more money, but we can never make more time. Another one of my mantras that I always try to remind myself. So I frequently say no now. And I think as a speaker, the day you become a successful speaker, I don't think it's when you hit a certain salary or you can command a certain amount of money for your speaking. I don't think it's about the name of the corporation that goes on your resume. I think real power in being a speaker is the ability to say no, and to do it with kindness and with respect, and just say, right now, I am not ready to get on that plane or live in that hotel or be away from my family. This is not a job that I need to take at this particular point, and I'm willing to let this one go to another speaker who really does want to be in the room, other than me faking it. I think that's the very least our clients deserve.
Very good. And because there's a kind of advantage of one of the advantages over the last 3 years of craziness is people were actually able to stay at home doing that. And now there's kind of hybrid. So just wondering how you adjusted, because you would have had fantastic experience prior to that. And then, you're kind of jumping into something totally different. How did you navigate? What did you learn to, make yourself better? Like what I found is, I wasn't speaking professionally. I was doing like more Toastmasters, contests and stuff like that. And what I found is not seeing the audience, because sometimes you can see all the boxes, but sometimes they don't show you that. And it was just so weird talking to, it's okay talking to because I see you reacting and everything. But when you talk and there's no reaction because you don't see nothing, I found that very difficult for me.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Roy. So many of the people that I was training, coaching, working with was exactly that. They had to go literally in a day. March 10th, March 11th, they were out in public looking into people's eyeballs and seeing their reaction. And March 12th of 2020, all done. Stay home, coffee cup still sitting on your desk at work. And now you have to stare into this camera and have a relationship with this little pane of glass with nothing happening on the other side of it. And the technology hadn't adapted quite yet either. We learned how quickly technology can adapt. We were already on an 8 to 10 year cycle toward this sort of bridge communication. We realized the need and the demand for it in the industry. It's just that what was going to take 8 to 10 years to build, we instead had to build in 3 to 6 months. And we proved that we could actually do it. And many people got very good at this sort of speaking and this sort of presentation. But what I had to work with a lot of speakers on was it's the mental state. It's not the physical state. So physically, yes, we like to be in front of a group of people where if we ask them a question, we see the hand raise or we see the head nod or the smile. It's that feedback loop. We can look at them, they can look at us. We're all in the room together sharing an experience. Much harder in isolation. You're sitting in a room, you're staring into a circle of glass. You don't get that feedback loop. So what I like to do is let people know that the psychological state is the only state that matters. The physical state doesn't change. So right now, I'm looking at you. You, Roy, are actually here. If I want to look at your face, I have to look down here to see your face and to see your reaction. But if I do that, what am I doing? I'm ignoring you. You're not here. You're here for me. But if I want to be there for you, I live here. So that's step one, is getting people to work to the camera and not to their notes, their slide deck, the screen, the Zoom call, wherever it happens to be, everywhere else. I always equate it to if you were in the room and you have a slide deck behind that you're showing with your audience. Slides are part of your speech. If I look anywhere other than the camera, it's like if we were together live in the room and I spent the entire time speaking to you like this. Here's my slide, and you're back behind me over there, and I'm showing you my slide. That's what a Zoom call is like if we don't look into the camera. The audience lives here. So as I work with speakers and I say, first of all, it's kind of a beautiful thing. If you've got 1,000 people in front of you in a room, you have to spend all of your time walking from one side of the stage to the other, taking everybody in, eye contact, back row, front row, right, left, center, up, down, lights in your eyes. Now, if I have 1,000 people with me on a Zoom call, guess what? All 1,000 of you are right there. And I can look right into that camera and connect and communicate with each and every one of you. Then the last part of the psychology is you are every bit as alive, in person, responsive, reactive right now through this camera as you would be if you were actually sitting with me here in this room. I have to remember that. So I have to deliver the same passion, the same energy, the same value, the same commitment, the same connection to you to earn your reaction as I would if you were sitting right here in the room, across the table, or in a chair nearby, which means that your responses are every bit as real and genuine to me. So if I ask you a question and I say, Roy, have you ever experienced the kind of thing that I am talking about right now? I can't see you nod your head, but I know you're out there in your living room, the office, the coffee shop, the library, wherever you're watching going, yep, I've experienced it. I get it. I still get the response. I just have to imagine the response instead of seeing it physically because the response is the same. We have proof. We have scientific proof that people are every bit as responsive on a bridge call physically as they would be sitting in a room at a conference center or at a Toastmasters meeting. That if you ask somebody, how many of you have had an experience like the one that I just explained there a moment ago? People are sitting in their living rooms going, yep, I have. And they actually put their hand up. They're by themselves. We have to remember that as speakers. The camera makes no difference. We have to deliver 100% into that camera like we would in the room, because the audience on the other end, they are giving us every bit as much of their time and attention through that camera as they would give us if they were sitting in that chair in front of us.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I love it. Love it. And like what I do is I put a little square, so I have the screen and I'm up the top. So I'm actually like, I'm looking at you, so I don't have to look down, but that's why, and that's why I don't do the split screen either. I do speaker view. So even though I'm looking at you, it's not that I'm looking down, and when I'm obviously introducing and the closeout, I look at the camera. But because sometimes when you're talking to somebody as well, you don't want to kind of dazzle rabbit look that they don't understand your question. So it's important as well when you're doing interview style that I'm actually looking at. But I know exactly what you said, and that's fantastic advice that you just gave there. And
Roy, let me ask you another one. I don't know if you've ever done this with people or with yourself before, but I frequently tell people, if you're on a bridge call, a Zoom call, a WebEx call, a Ring Central call, whatever it happens to be, Riverside call, and you're giving your talk, turn yourself off. Cover your own photo. Because I find myself frequently, I'm like, hey, how am I looking? Am I good? Is my hair okay? And I'm like, no, talk to your audience. You don't matter, Steve. Go away. Your shirt is fine. You're centered in your camera fine. Stop being a prima donna and just play to your audience. So that's another good thing to keep in mind.
No, definitely. So just finally, because I mean, with the social media that's kind of we're bombarded with, because I mean, with the book now as well, you're going to be trying to get that out there, but with your speaking career and everything, what you find serves you best, because there's so many different things out there.
That is such a great question. It's one that I'm actually asked all the time, and that I ask of others all the time, because I want their feedback. I want to know where they stand. I tried Instagram for a good chunk of time. I couldn't figure out how to make it pay off and work for me. I have colleagues who have done brilliantly with it. I try to stay away from Facebook because I believe it's become a bit of a Twitter-style morass of a lot of potential negativity and distraction. I really do find that LinkedIn works the best for me. It is the most still business-driven. It's starting to drift a bit. I get the sense that there's a new LinkedIn just over the horizon, maybe a year and a half, 2 years from now, some sort of new, strong business foundational social media that will work well. But I tend to find that the interactions on LinkedIn are the most professional. They're the kindest, the most supportive. People are very good at sharing content out. Like all social media, you always want to take a 90, well, you can call it an 80-10-10 percentage, or some people do it a 70-15-15. But try to make the bulk of what you post not about you. Instead, make it about others, supporting what they do, celebrating them for their victories, their achievements, their inspiration that they deliver, and that will come back to you tenfold. I believe that very strongly. So I really try to be as much about the other as I can. And I think the people who are most successful at social media, that is really what they do. Until you are a superstar, until you're Gary Vaynerchuk or Tony Robbins or somebody along these lines, I think it's always best to be about the other. And the more you can do that, even within your own promotion, you're excellent at that. You are so good at celebrating your guests and making it about them more than you make it about yourself, Roy. That's, I think, how you achieve that success and that connection point.
Fantastic. And I mean, what you said about kind of connecting, because I tell people do that, is a load of times people are just blasting out everything they're doing and they don't engage in everything. And with Instagram, to be honest, I've had some of them that for the different podcasts, and just not working, not feeling it. With Twitter, really, it's so easy. I just share it, but I don't really get that either. I don't see much interaction. Sometimes when you tag somebody, their people might start. So it's not worth walking away from. But for a professional side of things, definitely LinkedIn. And with, say, Facebook, unfortunately, I used to love the old Facebook, where I would see, if we were friends, I would see a picture of your family and things like that, and I'd give a heart, and I love that. Where were you on holidays? And I don't see that anymore. I just see sponsorship.
Yep.
And we actually needed somebody to come in and slap Facebook and replace Facebook back to what it was. Because, like, say for the Polish one, because I mean, even if I go into all like Polish groups, so I'm in 50 groups. Well, that's a lot of work because you're going in and you're posting, but they're the right audience, foreigners in Warsaw. So I'm sharing to the specific groups. But before Facebook, you could just go in and go, dump, 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 dump. Now you have to go into open each one and share. And then people, depending on who's actually doing it. So, for example, my meditation podcast, there's people go, oh, you can post your link, but you have to pay us. And it's like, for meditation, it's kind of like defeat the purpose. It's not as if I'm selling. So with the social media, I think you just have to find the right audience. There's so many different things to navigate around.
You are so right. Well, Facebook, look, we have the statistical proof that Facebook is technically dying. Facebook is really for old guys like you and me. My kids, they have Facebook. Facebook isn't even on their radar. They replaced Facebook before they were even born. And I think as the Facebook demographic continues to age, and as you and I continue to add extra years, extra trips around the sun, I think Facebook already, it's the reason they purchased Instagram. Instagram was sort of their next step, that Facebook now controls that algorithm as well. But our kids, whether they're using TikTok or
Snapchat is another one. My eldest, she's 23 today. It's Snapchat.
It's still Snapchat.
Yeah.
She's even at 23, I think she's a bit technically old for the Snapchat at this point, because I think that really is more like 12 to 14 or 15, and you get your Snap score, and every day they do.
You know what she's doing is with my mom. So her grandmother, that's how they connect, and they do this every day. They connect that way because she's in Abu Dhabi. She's a teacher, and she did get into it at a young age, but sometimes it's who you're serving it with. So she stayed connected with my grandmother daily based on the Snapchat.
So your mom is on Snapchat. Bless her heart. I love that she is doing that. I think it's brilliant. Let's have her come on the podcast and she can teach us how to use it properly.
Definitely. Listen, Steve, I knew it would be a good conversation. You've shared gold today. So you might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Very kind of you once again, Roy. I've really enjoyed this, and thanks to all of you who've been listening in and supporting what Roy does and being willing to give us time in this conversation. So I'm incredibly easy to track down. SteveMulter.com, just the name. That's my speaking side and everything that I do on the speaking and the training and the coaching front with regards to the book. Also very easy. CorporateStorytelling.com. You can find me through either of those sites, and I do have a gimme, a freebie for anybody who would like to take advantage of it. As a speaker, I encourage you to do this. If you go to my website, corporatestorytelling.com/guide, GUIDE. So if you go to corporatestorytelling.com/guide, I have built a really cool downloadable PDF. It's an e-guide called 5 Paths to Passionate Storytelling. Anybody, no matter where you are in your career, where you are in your speaking career, just getting started, somebody who is a seasoned speaker, these are 5 things that you can do right now that will up-level the impact of your speaking and the success of your speaking. So if you want to get that e-guide, you go to corporatestorytelling.com/guide and then enter the code SOLDTOLD23. Again, the name of the book is Nothing Gets Sold Until the Story Gets Told. So the code is SOLDTOLD23. Anybody, go grab that if you want to sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday, and I would love to bring you on board and get to know each and every one of you.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll make sure I'll put all the links, but I won't give the code because they should have listened to get the code.
You see what happens?
We won't make it too easy for them. So listen, thank you very much.
Roy, it's been such a pleasure. Really a gift to spend the time with you. And again, thanks to everyone for listening.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find my further podcasts along with the coaching bio.link/podcaster. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends. And when you get the book, keep that 100% 5-star rating because it really helps, and tell your friends about it as well. Until next week, take care.